They taught us to chase everything except ourselves, to measure life by notifications, by applause that fades the moment the lights turn off. But listen, 2026 isn't calling you to run faster. It's calling you to come back home. Some of you are tired, not because you've done too much, but because you've done too much for everyone else. You poured into people who never learned how to hold water. You bent until breaking became your normal posture. And somewhere between surviving and pretending to be okay, you lost sight of your own reflection. This is not a speech about becoming selfish. This is about becoming whole. Because when you don't focus on yourself, life will decide your direction for you. And life is not gentle with the unfocused. See, distractions don't always look like chaos. Sometimes they look like comfort. Like staying busy so you don't have to sit with the truth. Like relationships that keep you entertained but never evolved. Like dreams postponed because fear sounded reasonable. But growth doesn't negotiate. It doesn't wait until you feel ready. It asks one question: are you willing to be uncomfortable long enough to be free? In 2026, focus on yourself, not out of ego, but out of respect. Respect for the nights you cried in silence. Respect for the lessons that cost you people. Respect for the version of you that survived things no one clapped for. Let me tell you something real. No one is coming to save you, and that's not a curse, it's a promotion. It means your healing is in your hands. Your discipline is your language to the future. Your boundaries are the proof that you finally listen to pain instead of arguing with it. Focus on yourself when it's lonely, when people don't understand your silence, when they call your growth distance, because they benefited from your old self. Because the truth is, the strongest people aren't loud, they're consistent. They don't announce change, they become it. In 2026, stop asking, do they see my worth? And start asking, am I living in alignment with it? You don't need to prove anything. You need to build something. A mind that doesn't collapse under pressure. A heart that knows when to walk away. A life that doesn't require constant validation to feel real. Focus on yourself until your habits speak louder than your excuses. Until your peace becomes non-negotiable. Until you no longer recognize the version of you that tolerated less than you deserved. Because one day you'll look back and realize the moment everything changed wasn't when the world believed in you, it was when you finally did. 2026 isn't about becoming better than others. It's about becoming unrecognizable to the limits that once defined you. So slow down, look inward, and choose yourself not once but daily. That's not selfish. That's survival turning into purpose. Distraction doesn't always kick the door down and announce itself as chaos. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles at you. Sometimes it offers you a seat and tells you to stay a while. You think distraction looks like noise, like drama, like everything falling apart at once. But most of the time, it looks like comfort. Like routines that feel safe but keep you stuck. Like scrolling through other people's lives while your own quietly waits in the background. Like filling every silent moment so you don't have to hear your own thoughts asking hard questions. Because silence has a way of exposing things we've been avoiding. It reminds you of the dream you stopped talking about, the version of yourself you promised you'd become one day. The feeling that something in your life isn't wrong, but it isn't right either. And instead of listening, you reach for distraction like a blanket, warm enough to numb you, heavy enough to keep you still. Comfort tells you, you're fine right here. Growth asks, but are you alive? See, comfort doesn't demand honesty. It doesn't challenge your habits or confront your fears. It lets you wake up, repeat yesterday, and call it stability. And you start mistaking familiarity for fulfillment. Mistaking being busy for being purposeful. You can be exhausted without moving forward. You can be occupied without being aligned. You can feel productive while slowly drifting away from who you know you're meant to be. And the scariest part, comfort rarely hurts enough to force change. It keeps you just satisfied enough to stay quiet, just distracted enough to stay numb. It doesn't break you, it delays you. Days turn into years, and one day you look in the mirror and realize you've been surviving a life you never consciously chose. Distraction becomes the soundtrack to avoidance. You stay entertained so you don't have to reflect. You stay connected so you don't have to feel alone with yourself. You stay comfortable so you don't have to risk being uncomfortable and therefore real. But listen closely. Every time you feel restless for no clear reason, that's not boredom. That's your inner self tapping on the glass, asking for attention. Every time you feel unfulfilled, even when things look okay, that's not ingratitude, that's awareness trying to wake you up. You don't need more motivation. You need more honesty. Honesty about what's distracting you from your own growth. Honesty about the habits that feel good but lead nowhere. Honesty about how often you trade your potential for temporary relief. Because distraction isn't the enemy, unconscious living is. When you don't choose where your focus goes, it will scatter itself across anything loud, easy, or familiar. And before you know it, you're living a life that fits everyone else's expectations, but not your own soul. So slow down. Sit with yourself long enough to feel uncomfortable. Ask yourself the questions you've been postponing, not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. Because the moment you realize comfort has been keeping you still is the moment you start deciding whether you're ready to move. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that choosing yourself was dangerous, that if you prioritized your needs, you'd be labeled cold, distant, ungrateful. So you learned to shrink your voice. You learned to say yes when your spirit was screaming no. You learned to confuse being needed with being valued. But focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's self-respect, finally learning how to speak. Selfishness takes. Self-respect protects. And there's a difference the world rarely explains to people who have always been the ones holding everything together. You didn't wake up one day wanting to carry everyone else's weight. You did it because you're capable, because you care deeply, because somewhere in your life, being strong became the safest role to play. And slowly, without realizing it, your worth started being measured by how much you could endure. You became the one who listens, the one who fixes, the one who shows up even when you're empty. And when you finally needed rest, when you finally needed space, the silence you were met with felt confusing. That's when the truth started to surface. Some people don't miss you, they miss what you provided. Focusing on yourself means recognizing that lesson without becoming bitter. It means understanding that overgiving is not a virtue when it comes at the cost of your own well-being. It means realizing that love should not require self-abandonment. Self-respect is quiet. It doesn't argue. It doesn't over-explain. It simply says, this no longer aligns with who I am becoming. And that can feel terrifying at first, because when you stop bending, some connections break. When you stop rescuing, some people struggle. When you stop explaining yourself, some misunderstand you. But clarity often feels like loss before it feels like freedom. You start setting boundaries not to punish others, but to protect what you're building inside yourself. You stop chasing validation because you finally understand that being chosen by everyone else means nothing if you keep abandoning yourself. You realize that respect begins the moment you stop negotiating your needs just to keep the peace. And here's the hard truth no one prepares you for. The moment you choose yourself, You will be tested. People will question your change. They'll call you distant because you're no longer accessible. They'll say you've changed, as if growth is a crime. But what they're really reacting to is the fact that you no longer pour from a cup they were never helping to refill. Focusing on yourself means accepting that your time, energy, and emotional presence are sacred resources. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone has earned the right to your constant availability. And that doesn't make you cruel. It makes you conscious. Self-respect teaches you to stand still when guilt tries to pull you backward. It teaches you to walk away without slamming doors. It teaches you that you don't owe everyone an explanation for choosing a healthier version of yourself. Because the people who truly respect you won't ask you to disappear for their comfort. They won't require you to be smaller, quieter, or constantly giving to remain loved. They'll recognize your boundaries as proof that you finally learned how to honor yourself. And the moment you stop apologizing for choosing your own growth is the moment your life begins to reflect the respect you've been denying yourself all along. Pain doesn't arrive to ruin you. It arrives to teach you something you refuse to learn gently. But most of us don't want the lesson. We want the feeling to stop. So we argue with pain. We question it. We distract ourselves from it. We tell ourselves it shouldn't have happened, that it's unfair, that we didn't deserve it. And while we're busy resisting the experience, the lesson waits untouched. Pain is honest in a way comfort never is. It strips away illusions. It reveals patterns you were too attached to notice. It exposes where you kept choosing familiarity over truth, silence over self-respect, hope over evidence. Not to shame you, but to wake you up. Think about it. The moments that changed you most weren't easy ones. They were the nights you questioned everything. The loss that forced you to sit still. The betrayal that rewired how you trust. The failure that humbled you enough to finally listen. But here's where many people get stuck. They relive the pain without extracting the wisdom. They replay the memory but never ask, what was this trying to show me? So the wound stays open, not because it still hurts, but because it was never understood. Pain becomes power the moment you stop fighting it and start studying it, not romanticizing it, not living in it, but learning from it. When you listen closely, pain tells you where your boundaries were weak. It shows you the cost of ignoring your intuition. It reveals the version of you that was afraid to walk away, afraid to be alone, afraid to disappoint. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's why healing feels uncomfortable, because it requires honesty. It asks you to take responsibility for what you tolerated, what you overlooked, what you convinced yourself was fine. Not to blame yourself, but to reclaim your power. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And you start asking, what is this asking of me now? What truth do I need to face? What pattern needs to end? What part of me needs to grow up? Pain doesn't want you to stay broken. It wants you to become precise, to move differently, to choose with awareness instead of hope alone, to build discernment instead of resentment. And slowly, something shifts. You notice you no longer react the same way. The things that once triggered you now reveal themselves faster. You catch red flags earlier. You speak up sooner. You leave situations that drain you without needing them to completely destroy you first. That's pain turning into wisdom. That's suffering becoming structure. The scar doesn't mean you're weak. It means you learned how to survive something that tried to change you. And when you honor the lesson, instead of resenting the experience, you stop repeating the same cycle in a different form. Because pain ignored will revisit you, but pain understood will guide you. So don't rush to feel better. Slow down enough to feel clearer. Don't ask for the pain to disappear. Ask for the understanding to remain. And remember, the moment you stop arguing with what hurt you is the moment it stops controlling who you become. There comes a moment, quiet, uncomfortable, undeniable, when you realize no one is coming, no rescue team, no perfectly timed message, no sudden miracle that lifts the weight from your chest and carries you into the life you imagined. And at first, that realization hurts. It feels like abandonment, like the world looked at your struggle and kept walking. You wonder why help never arrived when you needed it most, why your pain went unseen, why your effort went unrewarded. But sit with that truth long enough, and something shifts. Because what you thought was neglect was actually an invitation. No one coming to save you is not life being cruel. It's life handing you the keys. See, when you believe someone else will fix it, you stay waiting. You pause your growth. You delay your decisions. You hold on to broken situations, hoping they'll magically heal themselves. Waiting becomes a habit, and responsibility feels optional. But the day you realize it's on you, everything sharpens. Your choices matter more. Your time becomes precious. Your excuses start sounding hollow in your own ears. Responsibility isn't about pressure, it's about ownership. It's about recognizing that while you didn't choose everything that happened to you, you choose what happens next. It's the moment you stop outsourcing your future to luck, timing, or other people's validation. You stop asking, why isn't anyone helping me? And you start asking, what am I willing to do for myself? That question changes how you move. You wake up differently when you know no one else is coming. You speak up sooner. You make the hard call. You stop hoping situations will change and start deciding whether you'll stay in them. And yes, responsibility can feel heavy because it means you can't hide anymore. You can't blame the past forever. You can't keep pointing at circumstances while standing still. But inside that weight is freedom. Because when your life is your responsibility, your power comes back to you. You realize you don't need permission to evolve. You don't need someone else's approval to take the next step. You don't need to be fully confident. You just need to be honest. Responsibility teaches you to respond instead of react, to build instead of wait, to prepare instead of complain. It doesn't mean you never need support. It means you stop confusing support with dependency. You stop expecting others to carry what only you can transform. There's a quiet confidence that grows when you stop waiting to be saved. It shows up in the way you handle setbacks, in the way you stop dramatizing obstacles and start navigating them, in the way you trust yourself to figure things out even when the path isn't clear. You begin to understand that strength isn't loud motivation, it's steady action. It's choosing again after disappointment. It's showing up for your own life even when no one is watching. And the truth is, the version of you who's waiting to be rescued is not the version capable of building what you want. But the version of you who accepts responsibility, that version adapts, that version learns, that version survives long enough to thrive. So don't curse the silence where help never arrived. Recognize it as the moment you were trusted with your own becoming. Because the day you realize no one is coming to save you is the same day you understand you were never meant to be powerless in the first place. Confidence loves to make noise. It announces itself early, speaks in bold promises, dresses itself in big words and bigger intentions. It tells people what it's going to do before it's done anything at all. And for a moment, it feels good because being seen feels like progress. But consistency doesn't need a microphone. It doesn't care who's watching. It doesn't rush to be believed. It just shows up again and again and again. You've seen this before, maybe in others, maybe in yourself. That phase where motivation was high, where you told everyone what you were about to become, new habits, new goals, new version of you, and then life got quiet. The excitement faded, the applause disappeared, and what remained was the part no one talks about, the ordinary, unglamorous repetition. This is where most people stop, not because they can't do it, but because there's no one left to impress. Consistency asks a different kind of question than confidence ever will. It asks, who are you when no one is clapping? Who are you when progress is invisible? When the results haven't caught up to the effort yet? When showing up feels pointless because no one knows you're trying? Confidence thrives on emotion. Consistency survives on identity. Confidence says, I feel ready. Consistency says, I'll do it even when I don't. And life rewards the second voice far more than the first. Because confidence without follow through is just noise that fades. But consistency compounds quietly, unnoticed, relentlessly. It's waking up and honoring commitments you made to yourself when you were inspired, even when inspiration is gone. It's choosing discipline over mood. It's understanding that real change doesn't happen in breakthroughs, but in patterns. No one sees the nights you choose growth over comfort. No one applauds the days you don't quit. No one celebrates the small decisions that don't look impressive on the outside, but are rewriting your future on the inside. And that's the point. Consistency doesn't seek validation because it's too busy building credibility with yourself. Every time you keep a promise you didn't have to keep, something inside you strengthens, trust grows, self-respect deepens. You stop relying on hype to move forward because you've proven you can be trusted without it. That's when confidence becomes real, not the loud kind, the grounded kind, the kind that doesn't need to explain itself, the kind that walks into rooms calmly because it knows what it's capable of. People think success comes from boldness, but boldness without structure collapses under pressure. It's the quiet habits, the ones no one notices, that hold you steady when motivation disappears and life tests your resolve. Consistency teaches you patience. It teaches you humility. It teaches you that progress doesn't always feel like progress while it's happening. Some days, consistency looks boring. Some days, it feels unrewarded. Some days, it asks you to trust a process you can't yet see the outcome of. But over time, something undeniable happens. Your actions start speaking before you do. Your results start answering questions you no longer feel the need to respond to. Your presence changes not because you announced it, but because you earned it. And one day, people will call you confident, not realizing that what they're seeing is the echo of all the days you showed up quietly when no one was listening. There's a moment in life when you realize you've been living for an audience that never bought a ticket, smiling when you're tired, agreeing when something inside you feels off, measuring your worth by how well you're received instead of how deeply you're aligned. Approval is subtle like that. It doesn't ask for everything at once. It takes a little compromise here, a little silence there, until one day you look around and recognize the life you're living looks impressive from the outside, but feels foreign on the inside. You followed the script. You did what made sense. You became what was acceptable, and still something felt hollow. Because approval is a moving target. The more you chase it, the further it shifts. What pleases one person disappoints another. What earns applause today becomes expected tomorrow. And if your sense of direction depends on other people's reactions, you'll spend your life adjusting instead of arriving. Alignment is different. Alignment doesn't ask, will they like this? It asks, does this feel true? Alignment is quiet but steady. It doesn't need consensus. It doesn't rush for validation. It simply feels right. even when it's hard, even when it's misunderstood. There are choices you make that don't come with immediate applause. Paths you take that look confusing to others. Moments where walking away from what's familiar costs you approval, but gives you peace. And peace, when you've lived without it long enough, feels like oxygen. When you choose alignment, you stop auditioning. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening with understanding anyway. You stop shrinking your truth to make it easier to digest. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring about the right things. You begin to notice how heavy it is to live out of character, how exhausting it is to maintain a version of yourself that was designed to be accepted instead of authentic, how draining it feels to constantly ask for permission to be who you already are. Alignment asks for courage, courage to disappoint, courage to be misunderstood, courage to sit with the discomfort of choosing yourself before the world catches up. But there's a reward for that courage. When your life feels right on the inside, you stop craving reassurance from the outside. You stop checking the room before you speak. You stop overthinking every decision. Your energy settles because you're no longer divided. Approval gives you momentary relief. Alignment gives you long-term peace. One fades as quickly as it comes. The other stays, even when life gets loud. You don't need everyone to understand your choices. You need to understand them yourself. You don't need to be impressive. You need to be honest. And slowly, you'll realize something powerful. The people meant to walk with you won't require you to betray yourself to belong. They won't need you to perform. They'll recognize alignment the same way you do, by how grounded you feel standing in it. So let them misunderstand. Let them question. Let them leave if they must. Because a life that feels right is worth more than one that looks perfect. And the moment you choose alignment over approval, you finally stop living for applause and start living in truth. So if the world gets quieter, when you stop explaining yourself, let it. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space. Space to rebuild. Space to remember who you were before the noise told you who to be. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need witnesses to heal. The strongest transformations happen when no one is watching. Turn inward. Move deliberately. Let your actions speak in a language doubt can't interrupt. And when you step forward again, do it rooted, not rushed, whole, not hungry for approval. Because you were never lost. You were just listening to everything except yourself.